Welcome to a pod somewhere in time. I'm your host, John, and I'm here with my co-host, Matthias. And you may be listening to us on your favorite streaming platform, or you may be watching us on my YouTube channel, Lair the Alchemist. Either way, welcome. If you're watching us on YouTube, we have to make a little note there that we did not coordinate these outfits that we are wearing. We just both showed up to the session dressed in our Maiden A to Z shirts. We are such big fans of Maiden A to Z that we wear these shirts constantly. So the odds of us showing up with the shirt on were high, and it finally happened. But Maiden A to Z is one of our favorite Iron Maiden podcasts. Make sure you check that out. Both Matthias and I have been guests on there multiple times. They go through the whole Maiden catalog from A to Z, as our
Yeah,
friends in Europe like to say. Okay, so today we're talking about Iron Maiden's. I guess this would be their first official live album, right? I mean,
yeah,
Made in Japan was only had a limited release. So we're going to say this is their first official live album.
yeah. And
And
it was only like 4 or 5 songs, depending on where you got
right,
it. So it's not like a full LP even. It's just the EP.
right. So this is their first official release to the world, full length, double live album,
Hmm.
Live After Death.
Mm.
It was released on October 14th, 1985, the audio version of it, that is, because they also released a video companion, VHS video on October 23rd, 1985.
Mm.
Uh, the shows used on the album were recorded from Long Beach Arena, which were sides 1 through 3, March 14th through the 17th, 1985. These were all on the Power Slave Tour, the World Slavery Tour, as they called it. And side 4 was Hammersmith Odeon, October 8th through the 12th, 1984. It's, of course, produced by Martin Birch, and the cover is, of course, Derek Riggs. So, we debated amongst ourselves, not really too much of a debate. We discussed, were we going to talk about live records?
Mm.
And we decided that we're going to at least talk about this live record because we felt like it's a important milestone for the band. It's a legendary live recording, so we felt that it deserved its own episode. So, Matthias, what do you remember about hearing Live After Death for the first time? And if you got any other little trivia things you want to add to this, feel free.
Yeah. Um, I think as a live album and being a Maiden fan, I got this album when it was released in '85, and as a 11-year-old kid, it's safe to say that Christmas came early that year because this is such a package. I mean, every aspect of this release is just awesome, to put it in plain American. And
Yeah.
uh, and I think I mean, everything from the illustration of the cover with this is one of the very best Derek Riggs illustrations. We got the backside of it too, with all the details. You can spend a few minutes just going through all the tombstones, reading what like little messages here and there.
And you can fold it out and it makes
Yeah.
one big cover. And come to think of it, this would have been the first gatefold Iron Maiden record, right?
Now, Peace of
No?
Mind was released as a
As a gatefold too? Okay.
gatefold too. Yeah, you can see it here, and
Yeah.
it's the lamp is doing a nice reflection there. But yeah, it's uh, it's it's great. This wasn't actually the first version. Derek did another one first with Eddie more or less coming at you like this out of the grave. They didn't really like that one, so he did a new one, and you can find this alternate version online very easily. Uh, and then he did this one instead, and I think that was a very good decision. Not that the other one was bad. I mean, any hard rock band in the world would like to have a cover with that looking that good as that one, but this is just even better. And as I said, all Christmas did come early. We have all the photos, and the original release had like this booklet in full size with live photos. You have all the dates, and for a fan and a young boy like me, I sort of got to know all the different members of their crew as well. So my 11-year-old was on a first name and face basis with all these guys because I was going through this release in every single detail. And I mean the bag for the inner sleeves, it just continues.
Yeah.
You have all the lyrics, of course. You have all the lyrics, but you also have this little essay, live recording thoughts by Martin Birch, which is really interesting too, where he writes a bit about his background doing live recordings. He did, of course, do the very famous Maiden Japan recording. He went with Deep Purple to Japan to record their album. And in this short essay, he talks a bit about things to think about when you record, such as if you record in a big city, you get easier equipment to great equipment. You can, because you need a mobile studio, and just like Iron Maiden's No Pray for the Dying, and like Deep Purple's Machine Head, the fourth side, the Hammersmith Odeon side from London, was recorded on the Rolling Stone Mobile. The first three sides was, like you mentioned, recorded in Long Beach Arena in the LA in the USA, and that one was recorded with the Record Plant Mobile Studio number 3. And of course, it's easier to access stuff like this if you record in bigger cities and everything. But yes, the like I said, the package, the songs, and everything make this. It's more than just the recording of their songs. It's like a statement, and uh, it's a huge one for many fans too. What do you remember from when this first came out?
This, I've done videos and you talked about this on my YouTube channel, perfectly timed live records.
Mm,
Sometimes a band can release a live record too early in their career, like Rainbow on Stage, for instance, in my opinion, is too early. Sometimes a band can not release a live record when they should. There's no official proper live record from the Ozzy era. The Live at Last record wasn't sanctioned, approved by the band. Van Halen never released a live record when David
no,
Lee Roth was in the band, right? So you can have extremes on that where it comes too early or it never comes at all. This one was perfectly timed.
mm,
The band, and one could argue that this is the peak. I'll speak from the U.S. Side of this. That for them in the U.S., this was the peak of their popularity in the mainstream. Somewhere in time, you could argue that they're cresting right here, and they ride this through somewhere in time. Then after somewhere in time is where their popularity begins to dip. But just they have tons of momentum going in their favor that's been building for some time now, going back to Number of the Beast. Every record the band just gets more popular. They're getting played on MTV more and more. They're never getting played on the radio. They never did. But on MTV, they're getting played more and more. So when this comes out, there's a real anticipation towards it. Again, it's timed really well because they're deep enough into their catalog that there's plenty of great songs to choose from.
mm,
This is the fault of some bands when they release an album too soon. There's not enough stuff for the record. But this is just perfectly timed as far as popularity and as far as where they are in their recording arc. I mean, it would have been cool if I could see making the argument that if this came out after Somewhere in Time. But again, when I look at Iron Maiden's trajectory, at least here in the States, they started to wane in popularity after Somewhere in Time. So I think that this was done the right way, even though it would be cool if there were some Somewhere in Time songs on here. So I was very much anticipating this.
Mm.
I was fully in on Iron Maiden, following them at this point. Like I said, at this point, you're every issue of Hit Parader and Circus magazine, which were very popular in the States, every issue, Iron Maiden is somewhere in it. They're all over MTV. I remember around this time they were doing like MTV used to do contests, and I remember Iron Maiden was involved in one of the contests. I forget what it was, like something like, win this contest and you'll get to fly with Iron Maiden to their next gig or something like that, right? It was just, again, they just seemed to be everywhere at this point. So I was very much anticipating this. I remember that it came out and I was, of course, wanted to get it the day it came out. But this girl I was dating at the time had apparently bought it for me for Christmas and wanted to give it to me as a Christmas present. So somehow she had talked to my friends and they were holding me at bay, from buying this. And eventually it just became too much. And I think she just gave it to me like, a month, 2 months early because it came out at the end of October, right? She had
Yeah,
a
yeah, yeah.
stall for like 2 months and that just wasn't happening, you know. But I got it as a cassette, and even as a
Uh,
cassette, I remember it folded out to like
yeah, yeah, yeah.
many, many panels. So even the packaging of the cassette was probably the most elaborate cassette packaging I had ever seen at that point. I remember, is my memory correct that isn't there somewhere where it even tells you like how many guitar picks they used on the tour, how many beers they drank, and
Yeah,
like
yeah.
stuff like that. Yeah, so there's all this kind of funny stuff, but the cover looks super cool. It was a single cassette, but it was just jam-packed. There's just a ton of music on this. I mean, if I look here, it was 98 minutes and 9 seconds of music. I mean,
Mm.
that's a lot of music. Even on vinyl, you're basically pushing 25 minutes aside, which is really pushing the limits of vinyl. I remember the cassette tape. There was barely any room left. The little window on the cassette was just filled with tape, and I just thought that
Mm.
was great. And at this point in time, there's no burnout factor for me on any of these songs. So when I looked at this, it just seemed like everything I wanted was on here. Aces High, 2 Minutes, Trooper, Icarus, Revelations, Mariner, Power Slave, Number of the Beat. I mean, just every song was like, yeah, this is what I want. Uh, this is what I want on an Iron Maiden record. Again, I wasn't burnt out on hearing a lot of these songs, so it was just fantastic, and I loved it was a very simple live recording. Guitars panned heavy left and right. I
Yeah,
believe Dave in the left speaker and Adrian in the right speaker.
yeah. So it's the same setup as if you
If
were
you were
on a
looking
gig.
at it
You
on
have Dave
stage.
left stage and you have
Right.
Adrian right stage. Yeah.
Right. So it's a very simple recording. Uh, Drums and bass right up the middle. It sounds very live. This is another thing sometimes from this era, there's certain live records is that they don't really sound like live records. And I guess we
Mm.
can discuss whether there might have been any overdubs on this, but this sounds like a live record. It has that energy. The crowd is really in it.
Mm.
You feel like you're at the show. You're getting the little extra banters from Bruce, and so yeah, it's just a great record. It's one could argue with the benefit of time and the
Mm.
benefit of modern technology where we're able to hear the other shows from this tour that Bruce's voice was probably not at its peak at this point. This tour was legendary for playing just a never-ending a tour that never ended, and playing that many shows with as physically demanding and acrobatic of a voice that Bruce had. If you listen to other shows from this tour, Bruce sounds better. You can tell that at this point in the tour, he sounded a little bit. He's starting to sound a little bit tired, and his voice maybe isn't as powerful as it could be. As a
Mhm.
kid, I didn't notice that.
No, no, no.
Yeah, I just thought I thought it sounded great. Again, this is something with history and technology at our side. But no, I loved it. I think it's a great live record. Little hard for me. Don't revisit it a whole lot because again, there's a
Mm.
ton of burnout factor. I find even like when we get to Running Free is a little bit much. It's 8 minutes. It's got all the crowd sing along and stuff like that. That's slightly boring, in my opinion. So honestly, I don't really revisit this a whole lot. And again, sitting back now in time listening to it, I find the guitars to be a little bit bright and sort of
Mm.
small sounding, which is
Mm.
really weird. The bass isn't as loud as on the records, which is kind of strange. Uh, so sonically, it's kind of weird. I sit back now and listen to it, and it's kind of like, ooh, this kind of doesn't sound as good as I sort of remember it sounding. But when I got this when I was 15 years old, I just thought it was the greatest thing in the world.
But
And it's,
do you think there is a difference between the first three sides, the LA recordings and the London recordings? Because I do think there is a
yeah,
difference actually.
I think the London recording actually sounds a little better.
Yeah, and apparently back then the plan was to record the actual album and doing a Hammersmith Odeon live recording. And I like to remember, I tried to look this up before when I did the research for this episode. I tried to find this, but I'm pretty sure I read an interview somewhere in a Swedish magazine that Bruce said the title was Four Nights at Hammersmith, and that was going to be the live album. But they went for the LA recordings when they had, because they had planned to do, uh, I understand they planned all along to do the video in LA. But then the band, I think primarily Steve, decided that the band was a bit tighter, a bit further into the tour, and they went for the LA recordings. And that explains why. So let's get this out of the way first. So what you're listening to is actually at the first three sides, like I said, are from Long Beach Arena, from the 14th to the 17th, 4 dates in LA. But what you're listening to, and I've tried to research this as good as I can, so I have to be humble. I might get one or two songs wrong, but the first three sides are pretty much all recorded the fourth night, the last night in LA, on the album, that is, because there are different soundtracks to the video.
Yeah, I was
The
going to ask about
video,
that.
yeah, the video is pretty much all recorded the second night in LA.
Interesting.
Uh, but I don't think they actually filmed the last night, because on the video it's the second night. There are a few songs that are the first night, which is, I think, Revelations, Flight of Icarus, and Number of the Beast. And Hello Be Thy Name is supposed to be from the third night on the video, but on the album, the all the songs are recorded on the first night, except the song Iron Maiden, which is recorded on the first night of all these gigs there. So on the last side, it's Hammersmith Odeon, and like you said, it's recorded from the 8th to the 12th of October. And going song by song, Rothschild is recorded on the first night of these 4 nights in London. Rothschild wasn't in the original set. So these songs on side 4 were songs that were being played on the European dates only. Rothschild was an exclusive. They did it like a few times on the UK tour, and they did it on the first night and recorded for the live album on the first night in London. 22 Acacia Avenue was a song that was performed on all of the European dates, but it got dropped later when they went over to North America. And that is also recorded on the first night. Children of the Damned was an exclusive song they wanted to record for the live album. They did it like 1 or 2 times on the UK dates, and they recorded it live on the third night in London. Die With Your Boots On, same thing there, recorded exclusively for the live album live on the third night. And Phantom of the Opera, same thing, recorded exclusively for the live album and recorded in London on the second night. And so I think and I suspect that if they had put out just a Hammersmith Odeon exclusive live album, the running order wouldn't be like this. I think
Yeah.
these extra songs would have been like put in where they were put in on the actual nights where they recorded the album. Because now you have like Iron Maiden, which is the last song, and then you have Encores, which back then was Run to the Hills, Running Free, and Sanctuary, of course. But here you have Iron Maiden like in the middle of all this, and then comes just another 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 songs. So the
Yeah.
balance is a bit weird that way because it doesn't really present the
Show.
set as they used to play.
Well, I just noticed on the VHS, I'm looking here on Discogs at the VHS, and the VHS it's missing the Hammersmith show,
Mm.
but it has Sanctuary.
Yeah,
It ends with Sanctuary, which is Sanctuary is not on the audio
but it is
version
on
of.
this one. They released 2 singles, and on the B side for this is a Running Free live single
Okay.
from released before the album. And on the B side of this one, they have Sanctuary recorded in LA. We also have Murders in the Rue Morgue, which was recorded in London. And Murders in the Rue Morgue, yet again, was another exclusive song they only played for a very, very few select dates in the UK. And they played it at Hammersmith. And this is from the 4th night in London. And while we're at that, they also released this beauty, Run to the Hills live from '85. And here we have Phantom of the Opera, and which is also on the album, of course. And we have Lost for Words, Big Aura. And Lost for Words, as weird as it may sound, this song was actually played pretty much through all of the European dates and a few dates later on the tour, even when they got to North America, and can't remember now. I should have looked this up if they played it in Japan. Can't remember, but
Was Lost for Words from the Hammersmith show, or was that from
yeah,
somewhere else in the tour?
that was from Lots of Words was recorded the first night in
Yeah.
London.
They should really, I mean, this just occurred to me as we're sitting here talking about this. They should release a box set. They obviously, unless they destroyed the tapes, they must have all these nights recorded. If they released a box set that was the 3 or 4 nights in LA, the 3 or 4 nights at Hammersmith, make it
Mm.
sort of this ultimate, live after death
Maybe it's in their
box set.
retirement fund plan
Yeah.
or something. I
Yeah,
hope
because they
so.
must be sitting on it because they obviously recorded these shows unless they, didn't save it because tape and all that stuff back then. But it'd be a little redundant because you'd be getting basically, did they just play the same? Do you know if they played the same set list every night at Hammersmith and the same set list every night at
No,
LA?
no, they didn't, because like I said, these extra tracks on side 4,
Hmm.
pretty much all of them, exclusive songs they only played on Hammersmith for a few selects, and they
Oh,
didn't play
got it.
all these songs every night. But
Right.
like they played Rothschild maybe once or twice. They played Children of the Damned one night and recorded that
Yeah.
one, and that's what's on the album. But I think that, and I think this is, if I had been their advisor back then, I would have said, let's do a full Hammersmith album, because I think the sound, and you mentioned the guitar sounds, I think the guitars sounds a bit better. Bruce sounds a bit better on the Hammersmith recordings. It is a bit early on the tour, and he's not as strained or what do you say? His voice is in a bit of a better shape actually, and they should have done the VHS, the video, the live video in LA as
Yeah.
planned. So maybe we'll get at least get, maybe not the box set, but maybe they put out this Four Nights at Hammersmith live package somewhere in the future. I hope, I really hope so, because they're really good recordings. And we should mention too, while we're at just stating in lots of facts here, but I think we should mention that the it was a guy called Jim Jukic who directed the video, and we must also, of course, mention that all the photos is taken by the legendary Ross Halfin.
Yeah.
And I think all the photos is a huge part of the package
Yeah.
for anyone who has the full vinyl experience to just go through all the photos. So a big shout out to Ross Halfin for his excellent photographs.
Yeah, nice. Imagine a nice box set with
Mm,
these extra shows, with a book, maybe
mm,
with extra photos from these sessions from around that time. I think that could be really fascinating. I did always find that the record, and this makes sense because of what we're talking about the fact that side four is the Hammersmith show. And maybe it would have been a little jarring if they had mixed it up so that the Hammersmith show was sprinkled throughout jumps from the LA show, one song at Hammersmith back to LA.
yeah,
Maybe that would have been too jarring. That's why they sort of put them all on side four because I always felt like side three should have basically been the end of the record.
yeah, of
And this
course.
other stuff should have been, put somewhere early, like having Phantom of the Opera at the end. It's a long record, man. And if you're just sitting there sort of listening to it, you get a little bit burnt out, especially after Running Free. It's the big long, getting the crowd to sing along and everything. And then it kind of feels like, oh, wow, we still got more to go here.
Mm,
So yeah, it could have been it. And like you mentioned, I always find when I listen to this, the guitars are very kind of small sounding. They're
yeah,
very brittle. They're like too trebly or something, and they're a little
yeah.
fizzy or something, which is again kind of strange because when if I hadn't listened to this record since 1985 and all of a sudden you were asking me to try to remember it today, I would have been, oh, it sounds huge, the
Mm,
band and everything just sounds massive. This is great. But then when you kind of listen back to it, you're like, whoa, but this is kind of the way a lot of live recordings sounded during this. I remember Scorpions Worldwide Live came out around this time, and that
mm,
suffers from a similar kind of problem. I remember Ozzy and Randy Rhoads, the tributes, that the guitar is very kind of bright sounding and everything, but it sounds like a live record.
mm,
I'm sure that there was maybe something that they had to a little thing to have to touch up here and there, but it certainly doesn't sound like it doesn't sound like Unleashed in the East, where you can hear the crowd and he's talking to the crowd, and then all of a sudden the crowd goes away and it sounds like a studio recording. Like
no,
there's no atmosphere to it. Sometimes live records, Thin Lizzy's Live and Dangerous just feels the same way to me, where it's like you
yeah,
hear the crowd and then all of a sudden they go into the song and the crowd just completely disappears.
yeah,
This, it feels like you're in it. The intro, the whole Churchill speech, that was also a super cool thing
mm,
because at the time I had never heard that whole thing, the way the whole show starts. And the
mm,
VHS, I gotta say, the VHS, I played that absolutely to death. I mean, at that
Yeah,
time, it would have been, I'm trying to think, that would have been the first, like, I mean, I had seen, I'm trying to think if I would have seen clips of them live before this. I don't think so. I think this might have, I mean, I had seen that live at the Rainbow Show, but I didn't
yeah,
own that. Uh, so this was like the first proper, I could sit down and
yeah.
watch this over and over and over again. And
We didn't have a VHS in my house, so that wasn't an option. We only got it when I was a bit older, and of course, I immediately bought the Lie of the Death VHS because I want to see this. But I know friends of mine who are about roughly the same age, who, like you, had a VCR who could see that. They have like a very warm and strong relationship to the VHS. But for me, even though I like it, I think the editing, the way it looks, is just amazing.
yeah.
But I was a few years older when I sort of could dig into that. So I don't have that sort of very deep personal relationship to it like I have with the very album. Uh, I think it was very very cool, and I think I read somewhere, probably in Luis Mariano Rodriguez's book somewhere, that the plan was also to do a bit of filming in London, but um, in these days you shot on film and you
Mm,
have to have like extra lights,
yeah.
literally extra lights to get a better visual when you
Yeah.
film. And just like the Beast over Hammersmith video that is now been released.
Yeah.
But the thing is, I have never heard of or seen any footage surfacing from those, from the Hammersmith nights, which would also, I think, with modern technology, you can bright things up a bit and make it work,
Mhm.
I guess. But I mean, in this box set that we dream about, if there actually are recordings, visual recordings from London too, I mean, that would be just great. And you talked about the different sounds. I think you're absolutely right that the reason why these extra songs from the on side 4 isn't like put into the set so that Iron Maiden and the Encores
Yeah.
would get their rightful place is simply because the sound is too different. Long Beach Arena is like a big sports arena, and you can hear that the audience sound is a bit more, uh, I think, distant is the right
Hmm.
word. Whereas Hammersmith Odeon is a big
Small.
but still a
Yeah.
theater, and you can hear that it's a bit more intimate, that the crowd is a bit closer, and that it's actually a building that is, I think, maybe my brain put in the blanks here a bit, or I try to find a reason, but I think you can hear that Hammersmith Odeon is built for sound, and so in that way it
Yeah.
sounds better to record a live recording there.
Right.
uh, Whereas Long Beach Arena is a sports arena, and of course we all have been to gigs in big
Yeah.
tin cans
Yeah.
with
Hockey
sounds
arenas or
bouncing. Yeah.
basketball places. Yeah. So they don't. It's also what was I going to say? Oh, it's also interesting that sometimes when bands release live records like Kiss Alive,
Mm,
the studio versions don't sound that great. I'm sorry if you're a Kiss fan out there, but the first three Kiss records don't capture the energy of the band. And I think the band, even as history is written for Kiss Alive, that was their motivation. Their records didn't capture the live show,
mm,
said the energy of the band live, so they released Kiss Alive, and the songs sound way better on Kiss Alive than they do on their studio counterparts. Here, that's not really the case. I mean, the songs sound good here, but they also sound good on the record. You know, it
Yeah, yeah,
isn't it isn't like, oh, the Trooper is flat and boring on the record. It's too slow on the record, and the band just seems kind of flat on the album. And this really brings it to life. You know, that isn't the case at all
no, no,
here.
no.
And they stick pretty close to. There's no drum solos on here. There's no this isn't Deep Purple made in Japan, where you get all these extra guitar solos and keyboard solos and drum solos. So you're not getting any of that. The guitar solos are pretty much like they are on the record. The songs are really, what is it? Just Running Free is the only one I think that's really kind of different. They stick
Yeah,
close to pretty much the way they are. So in some ways, it almost functions as like a live greatest hits
yeah.
thing. There's some bands where when you listen to their live records, you're hearing, I mentioned Randy Rhoads and Ozzy tribute. Randy would add all these little guitar fills, and he had to change things up because he had all these overdubbed guitars that he didn't do live. I mentioned Deep Purple made in Japan, all the jamming that's on that record, UFO Strangers in the Night.
Mm,
Schenker plays some of the solos differently. It sounds, they sound different than on the studio. That's not really the case here. The
mm,
studio recordings sound great. And the live recordings sound great. So it's just
mm.
almost like I always felt that all the packaging, the VHS tape, in typical Iron Maiden fashion, at this, all throughout their career, they're very calculated, they're very thought out.
Yeah.
Some bands' live records are contractual obligations. The record label is pressuring the band, and the record label throws it together. Or it turns into some sort of mess like Live Evil with Black Sabbath, where Ronnie leaves right after it. There's all this talk that, oh, it was, done in the studio. And that album feels like a letdown, a disappointment.
Mm,
But this feels like, okay, this is almost like a gift to the fans. This is like
mm,
we've achieved this. And again, really at this point, I would say that they stay at this level for somewhere in time, but they never really go any higher, at least here in the States. This is
mm,
them. This is them at the pinnacle. And I think they might have been aware of that it doesn't get any better than this for a band like them. Playing radio, selling out Radio City Music Hall for multiple days, selling out the LA Forum for multiple. There really isn't anywhere to go after this in the States. I mean, I guess you could play football stadiums, but back then, this is about this is peak.
yeah.
This is I mean, I guess they could have had a radio hit or something like that, but I don't think that was something that they ever even considered. They couldn't be played on MTV any more than they were getting played at this point. They could sell out as many nights in a row. They could have played for a month straight at the LA Forum, and they probably would have sold it out every night. They would.
Mm,
So I think they recognize that, and they put this album out, and it is sort of like a celebration, almost like,
mm,
hey, we've won here. We've won
mm,
if you're a hockey fan, the Stanley Cup. I don't know what people win in soccer, but that, like any kind of sports thing, like they've sort of reached the pinnacle here.
mm,
And I would say after this point too, is as with a typical live record, like if you look at Rush, for instance, Rush was well known for their live records marked an end of a chapter
mm,
musically for the band. After every live record, they would sort of start moving in a slightly different direction. And I think for Iron Maiden, that happens too after this.
mm,
I think Somewhere in Time is the first moment where I love that record, and of course, we're going to talk about it, so we won't get too much into it. But I think that is a moment of decision making where the band
mm,
starts thinking about, okay, where are we going here? And in some ways, it's the beginning and the end. Maybe for like Adrian, for instance, we'll get into this with Somewhere in Time, but I think it's a pivotal album for them as far as where their career would go after that. So this Live After Death does for me sort of represent the end of an era, the end of a chapter for the band, and moving forward after this, there would be changes.
Mm.
for the band. So, and it's just the whole packaging, the VHS tape, everything. It just feels like they really, really gave the fans. I couldn't have asked for any more as a
Mm.
15-year-old kid with this.
No, no, no.
Being sort of a cranky, super nerd fan at this point. I'm sure there's people on forums that could say I should have done this, or we're sitting here, maybe they should have mixed up them. But at 15
Mm.
years old, this was Christmas morning, and that thing
Yeah,
you wanted for that bicycle you wanted just showed up underneath the Christmas tree. Well, this was like, yeah, this was everything that I wanted. It was just perfect. It was perfect sort of companion piece to all the records at this point. The packaging, there was just nothing feels like it doesn't feel at all like it was done on the cheap or that they cut in any corners or that I mean, they gave you as much as they physically possibly could. There's 100 minutes of music on this. You can't physically put any more on a vinyl record.
no.
The cassette tape, there was no room for any more tape inside the box. Did the fold out, they couldn't have squeezed another panel in there. It was just, you know what I mean? They really
Yeah,
they gave you as much as they possibly could, and for that reason, I think that. That's one of the reasons why this is such a historic live record. Just sort of everything, all the stars lined up for this, the timing, the packaging, every aspect of this.
mm.
It's just very, very well done. And so,
Yeah. I mean, the actual shows they did in Europe were actually a bit longer, and in that sense, too long for the album because Dave had a guitar solo
mhm.
spot where Nico usually joined in at the end, and I which wasn't on the album, so no
Which I'm
comparison
fine
with.
with. I'm glad.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I'm glad because in hindsight, I appreciated the fact that a typical live record, I know on Live Evil, you had a drum solo, and it's like,
Yeah.
and this was a typical thing back then. There'd be a drum solo, there'd be a guitar solo, there'd be,
Mm,
on Scorpions Worldwide Live, there's this long guitar solo. Uh, I appreciated the fact that they didn't do that, that they just kept it to the songs because that guitar solo would have had to knock out one of the songs if they had put it on here. So I
mm,
would prefer to just have a song rather than an
yeah.
unaccompanied guitar solo.
And I think in that sense, now when we're talking about it, I haven't really thought about it in that aspect, but I think it's fair to say that putting out a package like this sort of brands are made them as a team band, a team. This is a team effort. I mean, when you talk about these other bands like John Uli Roth, and he, of course, he is a star in himself. He is
Hmm.
the lead guitar player of Scorpions, and in that day and age, guitar players doing their solo was an important and huge thing. So of
Yeah,
course they get their minutes on the live album because, hey, of course they should. But with our Maiden, Dave did a little solo, so the rest of the guys could go out and get a bit of fresh air, I think, or just drink something and
yeah,
in the middle of the set. But it wasn't like the important huge thing. And after they had like a sort of guitar solo thing for somewhere on tour, but that was more. They made it more into a song, and after that, they have never gone back to drum solos, guitar solos, or anything like that. But I did a little stupid, silly thing just to entertain myself and hopefully entertain you. Uh, I was thinking about when is the appropriate time to release a live album? Is there sort of a ratio, a magic number, which is the right one? Just as a thought experiment. So if you remember, John, I sent you a question like, would you like to mention a few what you think are classic live albums?
yeah.
And you came back to me with a few suggestions, and I have a few suggestions myself. So out of these suggestions, I took a closer look at UFO, Strangers in the Night, which came out in 79, recorded in 78. I took a closer look at Deep Purple's Made in Japan, recorded and released in 1972. Motorhead, No Sleep Till Hammersmith, not recorded on in Hammersmith because
Yeah.
there were No Sleep Till Hammersmith.
Yeah.
They were recorded on their UK tour. Anyway, released in 1981. We have Kiss Alive, as we have mentioned, from 1975. And we have Thin Lizzy Live and Dangerous, which was put out in 78, but it was made out of various live recordings from 76 and 77. Okay, so what I did here was to see how many albums into the career were they when they did this. So, in an average of these that I mentioned here, of course, I could have looked into albums like Unleashed in the East. I mean, there are many, but
Hmm.
just to make this sort of doable, I limited myself to these albums. So, the average released albums for all these bands when they put out their classic live album was 6 albums.
Interesting.
I also took a look to see at what age they were. I mean, the performing members of these bands, and I did find out that the average age of the musicians who played on these albums were 28.3 years old. And how does this compare to our Maiden now? So does Live After Death hit like this average magic numbers, magic quote unquote numbers? Okay, so Live to Death were put out. They had made 5 albums, so that's pretty close. The average was 6, and the age was 28.6. So that is pretty much spot on.
Yeah.
And just for fun, the of all these musicians, the youngest one was, of course, Michael Schenker. He was 23 when they recorded "Strangers in the Night." He was by far the the youngest in that band in UFO and of all these. And we have the oldest was, of course, Lemmy, who was 36 when they recorded the "No Sleep Till Hammersmith." So I don't know what these numbers are worth, but I just found it a bit interesting that Maiden pretty much hit the sweet spot when it came to comparing all these numbers. But I think before we end this episode, this special episode of Live to Death, I have to ask you a question, John, and that is: are live albums an important thing to you personally? Do you listen a lot to live albums or not? I can say for me personally, I am not a huge fan. Of course, there are live recordings I enjoy very much. Like "Strangers in the Night" is, I guess, my favorite UFO album put out, and I really, really enjoy the Hammersmith recording that Black Sabbath did with Dio.
Hmm.
That wasn't put out, but they choose to do the Live Evil thing instead. But when it comes pretty much to other recordings, as the aforementioned Made in Japan, I don't really go off on listening to long solos, stuff
Right.
like that. I don't know. It's just I rather just listen to I go to a show, of course. I enjoy that. But I don't sit down and listen that much to live albums. I don't sit down to watch live shows on my DVD or on YouTube. I just don't really get off on it that much. How about you?
It the live recordings that I go back to are ones that there's something different going on with it than the studio counterparts. So for instance, I don't re listen to this Live After Death very often. Because as I mentioned before, they stick really close to the studio versions. At the time when I got it, of course, I was totally into it. But where I sit with live stuff now is I want there to be something different about it. And I don't like, this is why I'm sort of a contrarian on this, that Made in Japan, Deep Purple's Made in, I have to keep saying that because you might think I'm saying Made in Japan, but Made in Japan. I don't really listen to that one a lot because there's too much. soloing on it. And hey, Richie Blackmore is one of my favorite guitar players, but between Richie, John Lord, and Ian Pace, if you added up their solo time, it's probably half the bloody record.
Mm.
There's just not enough songs on it for me. Now, Live Evil is has the feeling of, except I should say with they did a remix of Live Evil that has sort of brought that to life for me. That was an album that never felt like a live record. And it's got Dio singing Ozzy songs, which if you want to hear me discuss this in depth, go to my Into the Void, a Black Sabbath podcast that I do with my friend Darren, where we talk about Live Evil. So it has to hit a certain zone for me. I'll give you an example. I really like AC/DC's If You Want Blood, You've Got It. I listen to that record
Mm.
fairly consistently. And the reason for that is you get songs that are extended, but in a good way, like Bad Boy Boogie has an extra little Angus playing some really nice guitar. The Jack has different lyrics. Let There Be Rock is extended. The songs feel different. The guitar solos are a little different. The vocal melodies are a little different in a bunch of the songs. So there's enough differences in that, and it feels very live that makes me want to listen to that. It's only one album. That's another thing. It's only
Yeah.
one record. So it's not fatiguing. Although I will say, UFO Strangers in the Night falls into this category for me, where Schenker solos are different enough. I don't mind an extended solo if it's in the context of a song,
No, no. Yeah, I agree.
Rock Bottom, for instance. I love listening to Rock Bottom off of
Mm.
Strangers in the Night. So there's enough different stuff going on with Strangers in the Night that it feels different than the record. The studio versions for me, so I'll return to that. Kiss Alive, just because I find the first three Kiss records to be very underproduced and stiff and sluggish sounding. So Kiss Alive is and Alive too, I guess, are records that I'll probably return to. But no, it's not something, and really going past the classic era of live records. Let's just talk about Iron Maiden. I don't really
Mm.
listen to any other live Iron Maiden records, except unless you want to talk about like when they released the Eddie box and the BBC recordings. I
Mm.
sometimes listen to those because those are interesting. But all the other, a real live one, a real dead one, Death on the Road, all that others, the
Mm.
way they release basically a live record pretty much after every tour at this every record and the tour for that record, I just don't listen to them. It just doesn't have the same appeal. It just doesn't yeah, it doesn't work for me. So I'm very sort of picky about them. They've either got to have giving me something I'm not getting on the studio recordings, but I really don't want to listen to drum solos and guitar solos and keyboard solos and bass solos and stuff unaccompanied type of things. I'm totally not interested in hearing that. So yeah, they don't, so but back here at this point in time too, I looked Power Slave came out in 84, Somewhere in Time comes out in 86, this comes out in 85. So it was a
Mm.
real uh kept your kept your attention on Iron Maiden. I mean, 2 years back in the 80s, 2 years was different than 2 years today. 2 years was a lifetime in the span of a band. I mean, we're talking 80 to 88 is the first record to Seventh Son. So it slotted really nicely, and it almost provided a little bit of like again, it felt like they were capping something off. Like we've achieved something. Here we are, everybody. Okay, let's take a deep breath and let's see where the next chapter of the band leads us. And of course, we're going to get to the next chapter of the band in
Mm.
our next podcast. So that might be a way
Mm.
to sort of start to wrap this up. Do you have any final
Mm.
thoughts for yourself on Live After Death?
Mm. No, I don't think so. Let me. I'm just going through my notes here and see if there is something I have forgotten to mention. Well, apparently, I don't think I mentioned that Churchill's speech was not recorded in LA or Hammersmith.
Oh, really?
Churchill's speech was, of course, recorded in the House of Commons in
Oh, yeah.
1940.
Okay, right. Yeah.
if you didn't understand that, yeah, bit of a joke there.
Uh,
Yeah.
Churchill wasn't on tour with them.
No, he wasn't. But yeah, no, I like I said, I think we've repeated these things enough times now. But I think the whole of the package, and I include the singles as well. I mean, the you get the bonus songs on the B sides, which is fresh new recordings of songs that have never been released live before. Uh, the just the sleeve itself for the Run
Yeah.
to the Hills single is like of such quality that any other band in the world would like to have an illustration like that one
Yeah, for a
for
Maiden
your
record.
album sleeve. And here it's just a, I say quote unquote throwaway for a single release. Derek Riggs, Ross Halfin, we have Martin Birch, we have a band on the top of their capacity in a sense, even though Bruce is a bit knackered when they record the LA dates. And remember, after the LA dates, they continue to tour for a few months more.
Yeah.
They play like way into the summer before the tour has ended. So they get a to record another album, a studio album, write and record was totally out of the question after the length of the World Slavery tour. But we will talk a bit about more about that in the next episode where we come to the Somewhere in Time album.
Right. All right. Well, there you go. Our thoughts on Live After Death. We've got some other stuff you can check out if you so wish. Matthias has a band called Dead Cosmonaut. Pretty certain if you're a fan of Iron Maiden and classic hard rock and heavy metal that you're gonna love Dead Cosmonauts. Make sure you check them out on all the streaming platforms and on YouTube. I have a YouTube channel if you're not watching at the moment. It's called Layer of the Alchemist, where I talk all things heavy metal and hard rock. I also have a Black Sabbath podcast called Into the Void, a Black Sabbath podcast I do with my friend Darren. And I do an AC/DC podcast with author Martin Popoff called Kicked in the Teeth, an AC/DC podcast. Make sure you check out our buddies whose shirts we're repping here. No, again, like we said at the beginning, this wasn't planned out. It just happened naturally. But our Maiden A to Z buddies with their podcast, great podcasts that you can find Matthias and I occasionally popping up on there as guests. So check that out. So lots of stuff for you. We look forward to moving on here and moving on to a new phase and chapter with Iron Maiden with the Somewhere in Time record. All right. So until we see you next time, we'll see us out there somewhere in time.